Coming off a quality lunch. Oh, Burger King action.
I'm gonna have some Devani's pizza. Do you have Devani's where you are?
No.
Oh, it's a chain. I think it goes to Chicago. We got it here in Minnesota. Good pizza.
What up? It's a Saturday and there's no football. That is unacceptable. So we're looking ahead. We're trying to create some football, kind of, because we got a championship Sunday, one of my favorite days of the sporting calendar. Pete McCarthy, Neil Orfield with you here as we break this one down for No House Advantage and their big pick'em contest for tomorrow. Big time first prize, $20,000 to first place. So get involved with that. Hey, give us a like, subscribe, and keep up with all of our shows. We got DFS offers, all kinds of fun stuff here. And again, really, hit that like, do the subscription thing. We appreciate you guys. Neil, how are you? Is it like football withdrawal today? Are you okay with it? Is it just some extra time to prep for a big day tomorrow?
Yeah, I definitely could use some football today. I'm amped up, ready to go for tomorrow. Can't wait for all the football tomorrow. As I was telling you before the show, I've just been on camera now for I did my fantasy cruncher videos this morning, followed by just did an hour-long DFS show. So we'll see if my voice lasts through this video. It's gonna start getting hoarse here a little bit, I think. But yeah, no, I'm excited to talk about this slate. It's our last full multiple game football slate of the year. So we got to take advantage while we can. I'm ready for it. How you doing?
I'm great. I'm ready, baby. I love that. You line it up 3:00 Eastern time and boom, you get quality 7 hours of football. And it all means something here. I think we have a couple of good games too. We have clearly four of the top 5 teams in the NFL this year. If we had to rank them all season, we would have said these are 4 of them. The Bills were the other. one of them had to go. It was the Bengals who moved on. So now we can start to really look at this. And again, we're doing it for no house advantage of their pick'em contest. So one way that I like to attack it, and the way the pick'em contest works, is it's like a confidence pool. You're going to take 10 props. The one you're most confident in is worth 10 points all the way down to 1 point. You really want to try to get that maximum of 55 points. Last week on the Saturday, at least, first place was chopped. It was $1,300 to first place. We also saw a lot of overlay this past weekend. It's something that is certainly of notice that the contest is actually larger now for tomorrow, from 24 entrants to 3,000 entrants. So you could have a lot of overlay. Keep an eye on that tomorrow. But I guess I like to work backwards and kind of like spoil the end and then figure out how we get there. So do you have any like really big feel for the Niners-Eagles game or the Chiefs-Bengals game, whether it be one is explosively high scoring or one-sided, that might be a little different than what we're just seeing on the lines out there right now?
I don't know that I see it any differently than the lines. I mean, I think it's going to be tough sledding for these offenses in this Niners-Eagles game. I do expect that to be a low-scoring game just because these are two of the best defenses in football. So I think the line is pretty in line with me. What do we have the line at right now?
2.5 for the Eagles as of last night.
What do we have the total at? I mean,
46.5.
46. So I could see it going under that for sure. I think that if I had to take one, I would probably lean the under on the game. I just think that these are such great defenses. They're great offenses as well. So it's obviously no sure thing. That's why we have the line where it is. Vegas knows better than I do where to set the line. I think that I am inclined to think that that's going to be a low scoring game. The other game between the Chiefs and Bengals, I do see that one a little bit high score, more high scoring. It's actually surprising to me that they're closer than I thought they would be right now. We've got a 48 implied total for that game. That is a lot lower. These are much closer than honestly I would have anticipated. We've got, I would say, worse defenses in the Bengals Chiefs games against better offenses. So I am surprised to see how close these lines are. I would be, I think, inclined to take the under on the Niners game, take the over on the Bengals game. But what do I know? Vegas knows better than I do. If I were building it out, I think I'd probably build for most likely the under on that first game, because most of our favorite props here for NHA are on the under this weekend.
Yes, and that is almost always the case. And you could see it if you look to play, say, versus the house, you're going to see different numbers than in the pick'em contest and no house advantage, and they're going to be much higher. In the pick'em contest, they're going to be much higher on no house advantage. So it's very easy to take a bunch of unders. It's not a bad strategy. I know last week after we did the show on the Saturday slate, I took mostly unders and I forced in some overs. And actually, the forcing in of the overs didn't go well for me because I had like Saquon Barkley over on rushing yardage. He didn't get there. And that was just to try to be a little different than everybody else. So I'm not splitting it 100 different ways. But it wasn't all that bad. I would have taken $1,300 last week for first place in that spot. So anyway, let's get into the San Francisco Philly game. So you see this as a low scoring game. I think most people do. What does that enable us to do if you start to look at some of the props here on no house advantage and things that might jump out at you? I guess we can start with the quarterbacks here. Jalen Hurts, pretty high passing yardage total at 245.5. And then Brock Purdy has remained pretty low over there at no house advantage with the props for the last month or so that he's been playing at 222.5. Anything with the quarterbacks jump out at you?
Yeah, I mean, we've got an under there on Brock. I mean, honestly, the Brock Purdy props are not the first place I would go. They're all looking pretty close. We've only got 3 props there. Pass interceptions line is at 0.5. We have them at 0.8. So we've got the over hitting on interceptions. Touchdowns, 1.5 is the line. We have them projected for 1.4 for Brock Purdy. And then yards, 22.5 is the line. 216 is our projection. So I don't think that I would include any of these Brock Purdy touchdowns, except for as we talked about last week. I mean, if you want to include some props that are maybe a little bit less likely to hit, but you're trying to play a little bit contrarian so that you win more money if what's expected doesn't happen. Try to win money in those cases. Then you could consider, pairing a Brock Purdy passing yards over with a Brandon Ayuk receiving yards over, for example. That's another close line we've got. We've got 49.5 is the line for receiving yards for Ayuk. We've got him projected for 48.7. So a slight under there. But if you wanted to parlay those, correlate those bets with the Purdy over on passing yards, Ayuk over on receiving yards, or Debo for another. Debo actually we do have the under hitting more often than not. But you could consider them in those spots if you want to correlate them. But yeah, I don't think that I'm especially inclined to go to these Brock Purdy lines in many of my lineups. But as we talked about, as you brought up last week, if you do want to correlate, certainly that's something that you can correlate those and consider taking the overs if you are going to correlate elsewhere. We have unders on all of the Jalen Hurts lines. Passing touchdowns, we're projecting him. We're projecting him for 1.6 passing touchdowns. The line is 1.5, and yet we have the under hitting 50.2% of the time. That makes sense. He's just, sometimes he's going to throw for 4 touchdowns, so he's going to project for more than 1.5, but more often he's going to hit the under. Passing yards, we have. I kind of like this line. 245.5 is the line for passing yards for Jalen Hurts. We have him at 224.3 is our projection. We have the under hitting nearly 60% of the time. So one thing you could take the under on Jalen Hurts passing yards, and then you can pair him with, what do we have for we have Devontae Smith hitting the under 61.5% of the time.
Run through him.
Yeah.
So you go basically all the receivers, because there's so many unders generally when we start looking at the way these things set up on No House.
Yeah, that's right. So run through it. Just do to correlate the under with Jalen Hurts with under on AJ Brown. We're projecting him for 65.3 receiving yards. The line is 71.5. So you take the under there. You take the under on Devontae Smith. We have him at 58.3. The line is 65.5. Dallas Goedert, we've got the under hitting 50.1% of the time there. That one's pretty much a pick 'em. 47.5 is the line. We're projecting him for 48.3, but we actually have the under hitting more frequently. So yeah, I mean, you can certainly correlate these bets. At some point, would you be concerned about taking the under on too many of the receivers from the same team? Because it's like, well, somebody's going to have a big game, right? Do you ever think about, like, is there negative correlation in taking the under on, like, all of the pass catchers? Like, if you take unders on 4, Eagles pass catchers, maybe at that point it becomes a little bit thin in terms of, well, they, most likely if one of them sitting the under, somebody else is getting more of the workload. Like, do you have a line there for, like, how many you'll take the unders on?
Not really. I think, especially a weekend like this where we only have 2 games. So, if you want to fade an entire passing game, I think it makes some sense this weekend, especially when all the numbers are as inflated as they are. I think it's a little easier to get under on the receptions just because, there's only so many balls that are going to go up in the air. And right, if we're talking about the Eagles specifically, let's say they get ahead in this game. They're going to ride their defense, which is the number 1 pass defense in football by Football Outsiders DVOA, against Brock Purdy on their home field. They may not ask Jalen Hurts to throw a whole lot if they are playing from ahead. So at least I could see a scenario where the Eagles are this great rushing offense where if they get ahead and Brock Purdy finally melts down like people have been waiting for all this time and looks like a Mr. Irrelevant, then you can see how it could go that way, and you could be under all the way across the board on these Eagles passing game. I mean, it makes more sense than going under on the Bengals or Chiefs. I would be scared about that with those quarterbacks. But I think in this particular game, you could see how it could become one-sided, really one way or the other here, where you could do the same thing, I think, with the Niners. Well, I could see having a lot of success on the ground in this game, and you go under on that Niners passing game and probably be in pretty good shape if the Niners are the team playing from ahead here.
Yeah, that's a good point. You could also, maybe you take the over on Christian McCaffrey and then take the unders on all of the receivers. That's one way you could correlate. Just say maybe the Niners are, playing from ahead. They're keeping it on the ground. They're not throwing the ball to Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel. They're instead just running it with Christian McCaffrey. So that's another way you could correlate. Of course, in a vacuum, you just look at our numbers. We have the under hitting on Christian McCaffrey rushing yards. The line is at 71.
It's a big under.
It's a big under. We have projected for 55 rushing yards to the line at 71.5. We have the under hitting 78% of the time. So more often we're going to be inclined to take the under there. But as you say, maybe this is a spot where, you want to do a little correlation, work a little correlation there, take the over in some of your bets, because not a lot of people will. Like a lot of people are using tools. They're going to say, well, this is a pretty clear under. A lot of people will slam the under. You also gain leverage on all of those people by taking the over. So maybe you, in some lineup, take the over on Christian McCaffrey rushing yards, parlay it with some of the unders on other 49ers pass catchers on your Deebo Samuel. What's the Deebo Samuel line at? Where do we have that?
I think we actually have him close to an over, where you can look at him, but
Yep.
at least with the receiving yardage, so we have it even at 52.5. But if you want to play a bunch of unders, you go under 4.5 receptions. I mean, that's something I like looking at with the receivers too. If you are going to play heavy for a passing game, or you're going a bunch of overs or unders, you have two options with these receivers, and that's something that our tools do a really great job of illustrating. Is, hey, if you're going to go under on the 49ers passing game, you can go under on the receptions. And if you're going to go over on the 49ers passing game, you can go over on the receiving yardage. And there's just different ways to get there where our projections are going to show you what's more likely, and then you can kind of build out your game script from there.
Yeah, exactly. So we're, we have our tools telling us what is the likeliest outcome. And for the most part, most of my lineups, I'm going to be just relying on the tools, taking the likelier outcomes. But as we've talked about, a lot of people are going to be doing that. So maybe you build a few lineups in there, try to get contrarian, hope that, in this matchup, the tools don't get it right. That, as we said, if Christian McCaffrey does get the over there, which we're not anticipating, but it's going to happen some percent of the time. I mean, we've got it happening 22% of the time. We have Christian McCaffrey hitting the over on rushing yards, and then you just want to correlate that lineup with some other bets that do look good and that maybe correlate with it.
Yeah, and what I would advise to do, what I've started to do is, with all these unders being so heavily favored, what I'll do is I'll play a lot of unders, maybe in those 10 to 5 point spots, and then those 4, 3, 2, 1 spots, you can get a little cuter. You can try to find some overs. Sometimes, rather than play against, say, Christian McCaffrey, where we have it as a pretty heavy under, rather than take the McCaffrey over, just leave him off the board. And that can make you different than a lot of others, because if, let's say, 80% of the lineups have a McCaffrey under on the rushing yardage, well, you're still going to have the opportunity at least to vault past those and not cost yourself if McCaffrey, does end up under in that spot. So it's just a couple of different ways to play it as far as that goes. And you can come with it over at No House Advantage in these pick'em contests. If you're new to New House Advantage, they have a $100 deposit match. So when you sign up, use the link below. If you put in $100, they're going to match that. So you'll have $200 in your account. There are two ways to play at No House Advantage. We're talking about the pick'em contests. It is my favorite way to play. I mean, anytime you can talk about a $20,000 first place prize, that's a lot of fun. And there tends to be a lot of overlay in these contests, which means more money's going out to the players than to the site. And when you find those opportunities, that's usually a good thing. It's always a good thing. So be sure to take advantage of that. And you can also play versus the house. If you hit, say, 5 out of 5, and this is another area where you can correlate some things. If you hit 5 out of 5, you can hit for 21 times your money, which is just not something that you see on a lot of these websites. That's a pretty good deal as far as that goes. I guess one other question on this Niners game, and then we'll get into the AFC Championship game. So we have two running backs for the Niners in play here on No House Advantage, which is a little different than what we often see, where it's just last week, for example, it was one running back from each team. So we got Christian McCaffrey at 71.5 rushing yards, and then Elijah Mitchell at 38.5 rushing yards. How are you inclined to, maybe play those two together, whether it's one over, one under, maybe both in the same direction? Or is that something that you don't really see like a strong correlation that's worth putting together there? How do you eyeball that, Neil?
Yeah, no, there's definitely correlation there. Yeah, that could be a place, another place you could consider taking the over or leaving off the Christian McCaffrey prop and then playing the under on Elijah Mitchell, because Elijah Mitchell also coming into the game banged up. Like we don't know if he is inactive, don't play him because it's going to be voided, I believe.
Yes.
So you're gonna want to make sure he's active. But even if he is active, I think there's some real chance that he sees a lesser role because he's been limited all week. He might not be a full go. Maybe he's there to lighten McCaffrey's workload a little bit. Maybe they're inclined to play a little bit more McCaffrey. So I think that is one way you could consider correlating a little bit, is taking that under on Elijah Mitchell. 38.5 is the rushing yards, is the line for Elijah Mitchell. We actually haven't projected for 39.1, but we have the under hitting 56.2% of the time. I'm definitely inclined to take that under because I think that our numbers are assuming that he has his regular workload. And I think you add in the extra out of he might not have his regular workload. They might not plan to have his regular workload. He also could just tweak his injury early on in the game. So there's a lot of ways for Elijah Mitchell's under to hit. So I'm inclined to take this Elijah Mitchell under. And yeah, I think one way you could consider correlating is, as you said, just leaving off that Christian McCaffrey under and hope that Christian McCaffrey is more involved. And, even if the bet doesn't hit, maybe he's still hitting the over on his line of 71.5 or yeah, hitting the over on 71.5. So yeah, I think that you could consider taking the over on McCaffrey or leaving off the McCaffrey bet, take the under on Elijah Mitchell. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I tend to be a believer in the star players, right? We're talking
Yeah.
about championship game season on the line. If you're the San Francisco 49ers, who do you want carrying the rock? Christian McCaffrey or Elijah Mitchell? I think you're a lot more likely to see a lot more Christian McCaffrey. They're both kind of banged up in this spot, but you know what? I almost throw that stuff out the window, especially when you get to this point in the season where you're not going to limit McCaffrey unless he physically can't go with the calf issue that he seems to be dealing with. So, I mean, let's get to the AFC Championship game because it's a similar situation, right? You got Joe Mixon at 58.5 rushing yards, and then we get Samaje Perine on the board here at 19.5 rushing yards. I mean, I love getting under on that. Our projections like it, 70% chance of being under. I think that's one of those that you can put in that 10-point spot. Feel pretty good about it going into tomorrow.
Yeah, so I really like Samaje Perine for DFS, but that's because of his involvement in the passing game. He still just doesn't have that many rushing opportunities per game. So yeah, I think the 19.5 line, I'd take the under on that for Samaje Perine. I'm right there with you. We have the under hitting 70% of the time. Yeah. We're projecting him for 16.3 rushing yards. So I do like that, taking the under on Samaje Perine. Do you think you'd be correlating those at all? I mean, we have the under hitting for both Perine and Mixon. Their rushing yards 70% of the time. So both of them, the unders seem like good bets. Would you consider at all, playing, taking the Perine under and then taking the Mixon over, or vice versa? Is that a kind of correlation? Yeah.
I mean, look, this Bengals offensive line is banged up too. I know they had a great game against the Buffalo Bills. I saw a tweet from Alan Faneca, who is he a Hall of Famer right now? I'm not sure if he's a Hall of Famer yet. He'll be a Hall of Famer. He is a Hall of Famer, whatever it is. But Alan Faneca made a great point, I thought, in that game where because of the snow and the sleet on the ground, that the Bills weren't able to, get that first step that you're accustomed to on that defensive line. And it kind of evened the playing field for this banged up Bengals offensive line. And look, credit to them. They were able to run block like crazy. Joe Mixon ran like a man possessed last week and really has over the last 3 or 4 weeks. This is going to be a much different matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs. As we talked about at the top, a game where we're expecting these quarterbacks to air it out a little bit and put up some points. So, yeah, I definitely see getting under on really both rushing games in this particular matchup. You get 2 Chiefs running backs, Isaiah Pacheco at 49.5 yards. I like the way that he ran last week, but he still only was at I don't remember exactly what the rushing yard total for him was, but he had 12 carries, and that was a game where the Chiefs played from ahead most of the time, and Patrick Mahomes was hurt for part of that game, and he still didn't have a ton of work. Jerick McKinnon is more active in the passing game, but we're looking at 49.5 rushing yards for Pacheco, 26.5 rushing yards for McKinnon. This isn't a game where I'm expected to see a bunch of rushes. And I suppose what, the monkey wrench of that is, what is the status of Patrick Mahomes? And then how does that affect everything? So let's hit that, because that's one of these big questions here. How are you playing Mahomes going into this weekend?
So Mahomes, I haven't really. What are his props? I was looking up Isaiah Pacheco, but let me look up the Mahomes.
Yeah, I know. I threw you a curveball at the end there.
You did, right at the end there. You mixed it up.
I know.
So we've got Mahomes the line is 1.5 passing touchdowns. We've got him at 1.8. The over hitting 55% of the time. Yeah, I like that. I think that Mahomes is maybe a little bit less likely to run for a touchdown. He looked at practice. He looked like he's actually moving pretty well. With the line of 1.5, I am inclined to take the over on Mahomes. We have the over hitting 55% of the time. So I do like that number on Mahomes. As far as yardage goes, where do we have Mahomes there?
We have him leaning towards an under.
Okay.
275.5 passing yardage is the line. Now, last week against the Jaguars, there's over 300 passing yards. So it's a much different line, probably partially because of he's banged up, and I'm sure partially because of the matchup too.
Yep. And once again, you can parlay. I mean, it's easiest to correlate with the quarterback. So you take the under on Mahomes, 275.5 passing yards. We have the under hitting 55% of the time. We're projecting for 259 passing yards. You parlay him with Juju Smith-Schuster. We have 48.5 receiving yards is the line. We have him at 46.7 projection. The under hitting 57% of the time. So those two obvious correlation there. You can parlay those together, and you can do that with obviously basically any of the Chiefs receivers. They're all going to correlate well with Mahomes. So if you want to take the under on receiving yards for, again, Travis Kelce, 79.5, we have him projected for 75. We have the under hitting 54% of the time. So you can just pretty easily correlate your Mahomes unders with some of these pass catchers. They correlate very nicely. So yeah, I don't mind taking that stance at all. Those all look good. Getting back to the McKinnon, yeah, I'm also inclined to take the under on McKinnon just because he's getting more carries than Jerick McKinnon. He's also not getting that many. Just looking at his game log, 12 carries last game. He did have 101 total yards in that game. I don't think you can expect that most games, though. He had 12 carries last game, 8 prior to that, 9 prior to that. And he's not like he's getting a 6 yards per carry kind of guy. He's not the best rusher out there. So I do like the under on Isaiah Pacheco's rushing yards there.
And one thing that to keep in mind, just kind of get back to the quarterbacks a little bit, is if you have a feel for the game, and let's say you want to work backward and say, hey, I really like the Chiefs tomorrow. I think the Chiefs are going to handle the Bengals. Two things I like to look at is the passing touchdowns for the quarterback that you think is going to win, right? So I like the Chiefs tomorrow. So I'd be inclined to take that passing touchdown to over for Mahomes, and we have it, again, 55% over. And then you can also look at the interceptions for, say, Joe Burrow. Now, we saw this last week with Trevor Lawrence. He threw an interception late in the game because you get down, you got to throw the football. You got to throw it into double coverage. They know, the defense knows that you have to pass the ball. It becomes a likely scenario that you get that turnover. And look, our projections also like the over on the interceptions for Joe Burrow in this game, 56%. So, if you have a feel that, hey, you love the Chiefs in this game, you can look at the passing touchdowns for Mahomes, the interceptions for Burrow. And I always, that's something that I've liked to do on No House is, again, if I have a strong feel for how I think a game is going to go, look at that interception total on the quarterback that you think is going to lose. As far as the Bengals go, we get into their passing game a little bit here. Joe Burrow, 1.5 passing touchdowns. We have that as a slight over. As far as the receivers, I thought Tyler Boyd was interesting because we're kind of hunting for overs with the way that the projections line up. And Tyler Boyd is in over at 2.5 receptions. We're not asking for a ton here. Just get to 3 catches, and we have that 65%.
Yeah, I like Tyler Boyd's overs, both the receptions and the receiving yards. The receptions, as you said, is the better bet here. We have 2.5 is just too low of a line for Tyler Boyd. He is the wide receiver 3 for a prolific passing offense. He's generally going to score, have more than 2.5 receptions. We have the over hitting 65% of the time. So I do really like that over on Tyler Boyd. As you said, one of the few overs that looks really good in this game. We've got a ton of, in this entire slate, we've got a ton of unders that look great, but the over on Tyler Boyd to me looks great on receptions and even receiving yards. You can mix that one in as well. We have them projected for 41.6 receiving yards. The line is at 34.5. We have the over hitting 59% of the time. And as you said, you can correlate these bets. You can, maybe take that receiving yards for Tyler Boyd along with the passing yards for Joe Burrow. We do have the under on Joe Burrow hitting 54% of the time. The line is 275.5, but certainly more likely to hit if his receivers are also hitting. So you can consider correlating the overs on Joe Burrow with Tyler Boyd or T Higgins. We've got the line at 56.5 for T Higgins. We have the over hitting 50.6%, so just barely more frequently. So maybe you parlay. Maybe that's a better bet, is parlaying the T Higgins over on receiving yards with the over on Joe Burrow. I mean, all these guys look great. And then Jamar Chase as well. That's a great way to correlate, is these receivers with their quarterbacks, as we talked about. So it's another way that you can get a little bit different, because we don't, Jamar Chase, we have the under hitting 60.6% of the time on 88.5. Not a lot of people will play the over, but if you do, maybe correlate it with your Joe Burrow. Yeah,
and you have multiple lineups that you can play. You can check out our optimal lineups in Mass Enter, especially if you see a lot of overlay tomorrow. But you can look at the correlation for these things, because you got to get we're really looking to get 10 out of 10. We're looking at all 10. It's tough to get 10 of anything right? Imagine flipping a coin 10 times trying to get them all heads. Now, we have a little bit of an advantage because we have these free projections that we're working off of, again, at Stokastic.com. We're sharing them with you right now, but you can follow along over there. Just check out NFL and then free tools and data No House Advantage and play along as far as that goes. But we're trying to get all 10 correct here, so if we get some things to mix and match together, makes it a lot easier to go over or under on a passing game, something along those lines. Just real quickly, tomorrow, we know we got a lot of DFS going on as well, not just No House Advantage, but our lineup generator had a big week this week with some big money pulled down in the NBA. You could use that lineup generator for both DraftKings, FanDuel, for their classic contest. You can also do the showdown contest. I mean, what jumps out at you? What do you like about utilizing the lineup generator that's available at Stokastic?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite thing is this new feature on the showdown in particular. You can say how you think a game is going to go. So I know we've got some people with strong opinions. Brandon Katz in the chat, some strong opinions about how these games are going to go. If he thinks the game is going to go way over, or if he thinks that just the Eagles are going to go over, you can go in there and say, hey, I think in this game the Eagles are going to go over their total by 7 points. And the Niners are going to hit their total or go under their total by 7 points. You can build them based on how you think the game is going to go. As you can see here, Mike's got it up on the screen. So maybe, if you want to take that Philly 6 over, San Francisco 6 under, maybe that's the kind of thing you want to build for, or both teams going 6 over. I really love that you can now choose lineups based on how you're expecting the game to go.
And it kind of makes it more fun to watch it too, because it's not just, hey, let me check into the third, see which of my lineups is in there, and that's what I'm rooting for. You know that all of your lineups are going to lean in a certain direction. So you're rooting for, say, the Eagles in that case, if they're +6 on them, -6 on the 49ers, and you're going to have a lot of 4-2-5-1 kind of lineups that are going to come out of that. And then you could determine how contrarian you want to be, and a lot of different settings you could play around with the lineup generator. And that's included when you sign up for our DFS packages. But a big day of football coming up. I know that you've been extremely busy, Neil, and we appreciate you giving us some time and what's left of your voice here. We'll have more NFL content coming up tomorrow at 12:30 Eastern time. And we got NBA coming up live before lock starting up tonight at 6 o'clock Eastern. Neil, rest up, bud.
Thanks, Pete. You too. Enjoy your Sunday.